This week I wanted to lighten your reading load just a little bit, and instead of having you read Littlejohn and Foss Chapter 3, I'm going to present this interactive webcast. I ask that you watch each short little video clip and then take a short break, answer a few questions, and return to the next video clip. Chapter 3 in Littlejohn and Foss is a very important chapter. It helps us to unify all of the theories that we're going to be discussing and reading about in Littlejohn and Foss, and we're going to do that in a very specific way. As Littlejohn and Foss mention, there are many different ways that we can describe the communication field and unify communication theory. Littlejohn and Foss choose to select one particular author, Robert Craig, and use his constitutive model of communication as a field. In the spirit of what we teach concerning original and secondary sources, instead of using Littlejohn and Foss to explain Craig's model, I'm going to go directly to Craig. And you'll be reading Craig later on in the semester, but I wanted to present this as a way of examining the original source and then connecting that with what Littlejohn and Foss have to say about the field of communication theory. Let me begin this examination of Craig by taking the opportunity to point out the importance of an abstract. This particular article comes from Communication Theory, May 1999. You will read many scholarly articles, chapters, and other manuscripts during your program of study here at Marist. The abstract is a key piece of information that helps you understand in a short paragraph what the article is all about. So let me point out a couple of key things in Craig's abstract. The first thing you'll notice in Craig's abstract is he uses a lot of very scientific, scholarly terms. If you don't know the meaning of these terms, it's wise to look them up. First, let's take a look at the concepts, terms dialogical and dialectical. It helps to break these down into the root words. Dialogue. Dialogical is the process of dialogue, conversation, communication, a discussion between two people, let's say. Dialectical is the process of using dialogue or an exchange of information to break down an argument into logical segments that help us define, understand, and interpret phenomena. I've already mentioned the term constitutive, and then we get to terms like metamodel and metadiscursive. You may encounter three terms, meta being one, meso being another, and micro being the third, when you see people discuss theory. Meta is the highest level of abstraction. Meta generally refers to an observation of a larger field. For instance, metamodel would be models of models. So it would be the study of what constitutes a model rather than the examination of a particular model. Theory as a metadiscursive practice would be discourse about discourse, or the study of discourse in general rather than a particular discursive practice. When you hear the term or read the term meso, it means middle ground. It's kind of a middle ground theory, maybe a general theory, and micro would be a very specific theory that's limited to maybe a specific phenomenon. Reading further into the abstract and demonstrating how this abstract captures the entire essay in a short paragraph, the central theme in Craig's essay and point that Littlejohn and Foss bring up in the first 2 pages of Chapter 3 is here. The complementaries and tensions among traditions generate a theoretical meta-discourse, and that discourse intersects with and potentially informs the ongoing practical meta-discourse in society. And then he mentions the 7 canons of 7 traditions of communication theory, which you read about in Littlejohn and Foss. Let me explain what that means in layperson terms. What Craig is saying is we have a lot of traditions of communication theory, a lot of disciplines, a lot of different, let's say, silos or boxes that we can place communication within. Typically, these disciplines, these views of communication, the approaches that various scholars take, can be at odds with each other. This divides the field of communication and really prevents the field as a whole from moving forward. So what Craig is saying here is the similarities and the differences among these traditions generates a theoretical meta-discourse. In other words, a discourse about discourse. Let's talk about the field in general, the wide span of communication theories, traditions, and canons. And this leads us to becoming better informed about how theory might apply to society and how discussion about communication theory can help us unify the field. So, in closing, he talks about the topics for argumentation that come from the various traditions have implications for theoretical work and practice as we apply theory to the field. Instead of letting these different traditions divide us, he's talking about using these differences and similarities as the basis for a wide discourse about the communication field. And this discourse will help bring the field together, inform various traditions, and move communication theory as a whole forward. Turning to page 120, Craig again emphasizes major sections of his theory has not developed as a coherent field, rather consists of a set of separate disciplinary practices. In point number 2, he stresses that there is potential to look at the communication theory field not as a unified theory, but rather as a matrix, the 7 traditions that he mentions later on in the essay, that we can understand through a dialogue and through a dialectical discourse. And continuing on page 121, he makes his last 2 points that a disciplinary matrix, a matrix of 7 traditions, can be used as a constructivist metamodel, again, a way to look at models of communication that opens up an area that we can use to discuss communication theory across disciplines. And concluding with point 4, he claims that the communication field, communication theory as a field, can be looked at in terms of the 7 traditions.